Hi, in this video I want to talk to you about IAPT, the Improving Access to Psychological Therapist Service. In particular, I want to talk about the way it's lying to the public about the success of its mental health service in the primary care sector of the NHS in England. IAPT provides short courses of behavioural therapy for what the NHS calls common mental health problems, like depression and anxiety. It sees hundreds of thousands of people across the country each year and claims a 50% success rate. If IAPT's new to you and you want to find out more about it, you can get a short account of its history and activity in my Novara Media article, linked in the notes below this video. What I want to do is show local activists how you can demonstrate from its own outcome statistics that IAPT is failing for your community. So in this video, I'm going to look at the national picture. In part 2, I'm going to focus on helping you research how IAPT is doing in your community. Okay, so let's start by looking at IAPT's overall national claims for the success of the service. IAPT has published annual reports of its results since 2012. You can find all the reports online by Googling IAPT annual reports. I've also added the link in the notes below. So let me share the screen here with my browser and click on the IAPT reports page. So this is the page that has all the annual reports on. You can find the link below this video. And as I say, easy to Google. I'm not going to use the latest report, which is 2020 to 21, because that was a COVID year, and I think the pandemic distorted some important variables in the data. So what I'm going to do is use 2019 to 20, which is here. And let's have a look at the summary of results on the front page of this report. Okay, having scrolled down, you'll see the first results slide tells us that about 1.69 million people were referred to IAPT in 2019 to 20. These will be referrals from GPs and self-referrals. Every IAPT service, every local IAPT service has self-referral forms online these days. So 1.69 million total referrals, that is an enormous number of people. On the second slide, we're told that just over 87% of these people who were referred started treatment within 6 weeks. So this is the sensitive area of waiting times in IAPT that's being addressed here. So just over 87% started treatment within 6 weeks. But looking at that, you'd think that's 87% of the 1.69 million who were referred to IAPT. It's not, because if you look at the next slide, you'll see that only 1.17 million referrals, let's try and keep calling them people to add a bit of humanity to the statistics, only 1.17 million people actually started treatment. So obviously, if you didn't start treatment, there was no waiting time. What's interesting also about this figure, obviously, is that nearly a third of the total number of referrals never started a course of IAPT treatment. And yet there they are in the stats. And a bit later in this video, I'll talk about the significance of that original total figure, and now IAPT uses it to claim that it's meeting one of the important targets that are set for it by the government and the NHS. If we move on, the next slide is also, of course, incredibly interesting to us, particularly if you're a therapist working outside IAPT in a more relational setting where the relationship between you and your clients is negotiated between you and is probably based on an ongoing developing understanding of what the client's needs are. But here in IAPT, the average course of treatment consists of 6.9 sessions. A couple of years back, they gave statistics for the number of people who completed a course of treatment with just 2 sessions, and it was actually 20%, so 1/5 of people referred to IAPT did 2 sessions, and that was seen as a completed course of treatment. The mind boggles somewhat. Moving down, we come to a very important statistic, which is that just over 606,000 referrals or people actually completed a course of treatment. Now, of course, this is really very important because it tells us that out of the original 1.69 million, only 35.8% actually completed a course of IAPT treatment. Almost 2/3 of people referred by their GP or who filled in an IAPT self-referral form did not complete a course of treatment. So moving down, we come to the final summary slide, and this is the finale statistic, which is used over and over again to declare the IAPT service to be an enormous success. So just over 50%, 51.1% of referrals moved to recovery. But what we need to notice here is that when it says 51.1% of referrals that move to recovery, it does not mean 51% of 1.69 million referrals recovered. What it means is 51% of referrals who actually completed a course of treatment recovered. Now, given that 2/3 of people drop out and only a 1/3 complete a course of treatment, 50% then of people who recovered adds up to 310,000 people. In other words, 18% of the original 1.69 million people actually recovered. This is the extraordinary figure, you know. So before we move on, let me just say something about how IAPT defines recovery. It says that a referral has moved to recovery if they were defined as a clinical case at the start of their treatment and not as a clinical case at the end of their treatment, measured by scores from questionnaires tailored to their specific condition. Let's say a person is going to be diagnosed as suffering from depression. They'll be asked to fill in a questionnaire which scores them on a sliding scale according to a number of behavioral variables IAPT considers indicative of depression. If the person scores above the threshold for clinically significant depression, they'll be offered a course of treatment, say 10 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy. Each session ends with a sliding scale questionnaire similar to the assessment. If the score indicating depression declines, the client is said to be improving. If the improvement is consistent, the client is said to be experiencing reliable improvement. If by the end of the course of treatment, the client is no longer above the clinical threshold for depression, they are said to have recovered. If that recovery follows reliable improvement, they are said to have achieved reliable recovery. Recovery, which can be thought of as having some substance, and sustainability. The annual reports give figures for both recovery and reliable recovery. Expressed as outcome rates, the reliable recovery rate is slightly lower, as we might expect. So while the recovery rate here for this year we've been looking at is 18% of total referrals, the reliable recovery rate is 16%. This is the figure I always use when I'm analysing IAPT statistics. By their own definition, this is the most reliable outcome within IAPT's terms of reference. Okay, so if we were to represent those figures that we've just looked at the front of the report diagrammatically, I think we can see that something really quite dramatic is happening in terms of the difference between the claimed success rate by IAPT and the actual success rate, which I think we can call a failure rate. So let's turn to that now. So here's a simple bar chart of the results for the whole of England for 2019-2020, the year we've been talking about. And I think you can see it's quite a dramatic picture with the total number of referrals on the top line, the percentage of those referrals that enter treatment, and then the 36% of all referrals who finish a course of treatment, and finally the number of people who achieve reliable recovery, which is 16% of the original total of referrals. That is a pretty dramatic fall in the number of people who are actually achieving what IAPT considers to be a successful treatment. Many of us as psychotherapists would doubt whether the idea of reliable recovery as defined by IAPT has that much meaning, or certainly not the kind of importance or reliability that IAPT is claiming. If we look at the same figures as a pie chart, this too is a fairly dramatic picture of a failing system. So this is the same picture as the bar charts that I've just been showing you in a different format. I think it really stands out in the pie chart how few people are actually reliably recovering. Of course, the other way of looking at this pie chart is that IAPT claim 16% success. I think what we might say is what it achieved in 2019 to 2020 was an 84% failure. Now, this kind of failure rate is pretty universal across the IAPT service. Here are the same kind of graphs for my area. I live in Tower Hamlets in London. Tower Hamlets is in northeast London, in the northeast London integrated care system, and it has a large Bangladeshi population. So looking at the 2019-20 report, here's what the figures look like for the Northeast London ICS. If you don't know what ICSs are, they are the new administrative areas for the NHS. The integrated care system areas. And if you want to do any campaigning around the NHS, it would be a good idea to know what the implications of the ICS system are for the privatization of healthcare, including mental health care. So these are the stats for North East London. You'll see that the reliable recovery rate is 19%, a bit higher than the national average. From the same bank of statistics, we can isolate Tower Hamlets, the borough of Tower Hamlets. We can, for the moment, the clinical commissioning group may well become an ICS-wide group in the future, but for the moment you can get borough clinical commissioning group statistics. So in my borough, in Tower Hamlets, you can see that the reliable recovery rate is down to 13%. If we go to ethnicity and ethnic minority background, for comparison, we can have a look at white referrals. This is one of the breakdowns in the local statistics, which is really interesting, really detailed figures on different minority ethnic backgrounds. But among the white population of Tower Hamlets, the number who entered treatment, that's 88% of everybody referred, 49% finished a course of treatment, and 21% achieved reliable recovery, kind of significantly higher than the average either for the borough or for England as a whole. If by comparison we have a look at the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets, you can see that though 81% actually entered treatment of some kind, only 31% finished a course of treatment and 11% achieved reliable recovery. So these are the kind of figures that we can extract from the detailed spreadsheets of the annual reports. And right at the end here, in a moment, I'm just going to show you what those detailed spreadsheets look like to give you an idea of the mass of information that is available there. And then we'll enter that world properly in the next video that I make, hopefully. But for the moment, if we just think about the implications of these kinds of statistics, they are pretty momentous, and there is a pretty momentous deception going on in the world of IAPT and the healthcare managers and the government who use IAPT statistics in the way that they do. So, for example, the service has a number of targets it's expected to meet, and I want to just look at two of these very briefly. The number of people it's meant to provide access to psychological therapies, and as we've seen, the percentage of its referrals who are expected to achieve meaningful recovery. So just put to one side what we think about IAPT's use of the medical model, its way of diagnosing, the limitations of the therapy it provides, and the validity of its notion of recovery. Let's just put those to one side for now, and let's just stay with its own definitions of what it's achieving as evidenced by its annual reports. So first, IAPT was given a target by the 5-year forward view for mental health in 2016, and again by the NHS long-term plan in 2019, of increasing access to psychological therapy by 2020-2021 to 25% of adults who are estimated to suffer from common mental health conditions each year. That's 1.5 million people. Okay, so that's one target. That's the access target. Secondly, IAPT has a target of 50% as a recovery rate, as we've seen. It claims to meet both these targets. But if we take into account the reality of a 2/3 dropout rate, are either of these claims really true? I don't think so. Is being referred but never turning up or dropping out after one session actually being given access? Where do the 2/3 of people who either never enter treatment or drop out go? Where do they go? What happens to them? Does IAPT or anyone else, but in particular, does IAPT follow up on the people who dropped out? No, it doesn't. Is a 50% recovery rate a success, either in its own right, or when we calculate that it's only 16% of people referred who achieve reliable recovery? Does IAPT do follow-up studies to check that its reliable recovery is actually reliable? No, it doesn't. It actually follows up after 6 months on about 2% of its referrals who've finished treatment. In my area, in Northeast London, I think my trust, the East London Foundation Trust, the Mental Health Trust in Tower Hamlets, followed up on 35 people, not 35,000, 35 people. So this is the overview of the statistical smokescreen that IAPT's blowing in our faces, and which the politicians and health managers seem perfectly happy to support. Okay, so before we end, I just want to give you a taster of how these IAPT annual reports can be used to take quite a detailed look at what is going on as far as IAPT is concerned in your locality. And this is going to be the subject of the second video that I'll be doing shortly. So hold your breath because I'm about to show you just what a massive avalanche of statistics is available inside these annual reports. And it does take a bit of getting your head round to even begin to feel that you might be able to manage to extract something from the spreadsheets that they provide. But honestly, I assure you that you can, just with a bit of patience. It's not too difficult to start to get some very interesting sort of information about your locality. So let's just have a look at what it looks like, just to prepare you for next time. I'm going to share the screen again and go back to the front page of the IAPT reports. And again, we'll go to 2019 to 20. So I'm going to click on that report. And here you see is the front page that we had quite a detailed look at this time around. So we're going to scroll through those front page slides to the annual interactive dashboard. Okay, here it is. Don't know why it's so slow. Okay, that's the front of the dashboard. It repeats the overall data that we've looked at. So if we go to the contents page down there in the right-hand corner, here's the menu of spreadsheets that are available. For example, if we go to key activity by CCG, this should come up as a set of maps about referrals received, referrals entering treatment, referrals finishing treatment. There are several maps like this. That's one kind of evidence. I'm going to go back to the contents page because I want to show you a more typical page that has kind of spreadsheets and a lot of information that you can extract stuff for your area from. Okay, so here we go. These are the monsters, because what we have here is massive lists of providers, different variables in terms of type of client, in terms of age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender. So looking at the boxes across the top here, there is a whole range of choices for what you might like to search. So you can choose to search by CCG, which is where I would search for Tower Hamlets. You can search by provider, and this is really interesting because you know the provider in your area is just as likely to be private as it is to be NHS. And this spreadsheet really doesn't want to behave under these conditions as a kind of Zoom illustration. But anyway, I think that's enough to give you a sense of what's available. So all of this information can be filtered by locality and organization, and I hope that wasn't too confusing. I obviously need to practice a bit more how to get that spreadsheet to work on a Zoom video, that I will practice, and hopefully we can look into those local statistics next time. So that's it for now. Bye.